To start, could you just briefly tell us what you are working on and how your research on Ryti connects to our Aggressor Project?
My research on Risto Ryti stems from my long-standing interest in the history of historiography, and it connects directly to the Aggressor Project, as Ryti was seen as a key figure and held individually responsible for Finland's aggression against the Soviet Union during the Second World War.
If I'm not mistaken, Ryti was one of the few political leaders who was tried specifically for the crime of aggression. And it happened very quickly, even earlier than the Nuremberg process. I was wondering why did it happen? Maybe because of the pressure from the side of Soviet Union?
That's one reason, and an important reason, the pressure from the side of the Soviet Union. And there was a threat that if Finland does not organize its own prosecution towards Ryti and the 7 other politicians who were blamed as well, he was not the only one, but he was the main person because he was the president. So there was a threat that these persons would have been transported to the Soviet Union. Finns wanted to make this trial to happen so that they could avoid this. I would say that there was also pressure from Great Britain because of these terrible crimes against humanity. And after all, we have to say that in Finland we also had a peace opposition. There was a small communist movement in Finland, and on the center left there were people who thought that Ryti should have started peace negotiations earlier than he did. So there was also a kind of mixed sentiment towards Ryti in Finland as well. It was only after this trial, which was considered so unfair, because the Soviet Union was not responsible of anything. So it was only after this trial that Ryti's kind of martyrdom really in Finland took more general footing.
Can you tell us how Ryti's image evolved from the post-war period to the present, and what were major turning points that influenced these narratives?
The changes in these interpretations can be seen as a kind of barometer of broader East-West relations, and more specifically of relations between Finland and the Soviet Union, or later the Russian Federation. If we now think about the Soviet Union, interpretations of Ryti were from the very beginning incorporated into the broad narrative of the Great Patriotic War against fascism. And Ryti was quite, I would say, simplistically portrayed as a Finnish fascist, although we have to say that Ryti was not National Socialist. He never supported fascism or National Socialism. He was allied with Nazi Germany mostly because of strategic reasons, tactical reasons, not because he was somehow supporting Nazism. When the Soviet Union collapsed, there was a period of greater openness in Russian society and history writing. And during that time, both the Finnish perspective in this issue and the Soviet Union's role in the war against Finland in 1939 were taken into account. But especially after the Russian full-scale invasion of Ukraine, the image of fascist Finland with Ryti as Hitler's ally has re-emerged. In Finland, by contrast, as long as the conservative wartime generation dominated history writing, Ryti's war guilt was denied, and he was portrayed as a scapegoat. But in the more center-left political climate of the 1970s and 1980s, a more self-critical interpretations in Finland gained prominence. They presented Ryti not as a martyr, but more as a daring risk taker who lost the game. Then again, the collapse of the Soviet Union, also in Finland, marked a turning point. Gates were open to a wave of neo-nationalism. And now there was a renewed interest in Ryti, because Ryti was now taken as a victim of the Soviet Union. And now these neo-nationalists wanted to wash his reputation. They are not really willing to consider Ryti's responsibilities during the war. Was it really necessary to ally with Nazi Germany? What I think we should learn from my case is that it is complex, and we should consider it in all its complexity without trying to find any easy black and white interpretation or solution to this situation. And indeed also point out that although the position of the small state and small state leaders is often difficult in crisis situations, it does not mean that they don't have any responsibility afterwards.